Hi, I'm Lee. I'm a New Zealander living in the East Riding of Yorkshire, and this is my podcast about my handmade life. I'm on Instagram as Luli_, and on Ravelry as Luli, and I'm a purveyor of fine knitting bags. I have Shop Luli on Etsy, but you can find links to all of my online places at luli.com. It's really nice to be back and chatting with you again and having a little discussion about my handmade life. The first thing I have to start with this week is a little bit of chat about community news and what's going on in the Luli Ravelry group. If you haven't come over and said hello, then please come and introduce yourself, because it would be really nice to get to know you a bit better. So at the moment in the Ravelry group, we have the Stash Appreciation Society going on, which is a year-long challenge to knit from stash and to appreciate the things that we already have. And each month from the finished objects thread, I draw for a pattern prize. And this month, Meg from Mrs. M's Curiosity Cabinet has very kindly offered to sponsor that prize. So that will be drawn on the 1st of July for everybody who has entered something in the finished objects thread this month. So your finished objects just have to be 60% stash, and that's from 2016 or earlier in order to qualify for that. And Meg has recently started an audio podcast. It's called Mrs. M's Curiosity Cabinet. She's had a blog for a while, but I really like her audio podcast. It's really interesting and informative. She talks about lots of different makerly adventures, and if you really want to get geeky about socks without nylon, then she has a really interesting sock experiment going on. So I would urge you to go over and have a listen to her podcast. It's really good. Stash Appreciation Society. So last week I drew for the, was it last week or the week before? I drew for the winner of the spring challenge, and I had been knitting the Mix-a-Lot socks by Rachel Coopy, but I had failed to meet my own deadline. So here they are, all finished. I'm not sure that I have much more to say about these. I did them in Hazelknit's Artesian socks, and I used leftovers from my exploration station. These aren't for me, they're a size 5, and so I'm going to give them to my allotmenteering chum. She popped around today and I told her she couldn't have them because I had to show them to you guys first. There are actually 2, but I only have 1 blocker in this size, so there is actually a pair of evidence. Interestingly, these, when I weighed these, they were 84 grams, which is actually quite, well, that's quite a lot of yardage, I thought. So obviously the lace pattern uses up a bit more yardage than I normally would for a pair of size 7 socks for me. So had I knitted these for me, I probably would have got well into 90 grams of yarn. So if you are going to knit these, just keep in mind that you might need a bit more yarn than you usually do. So yeah, those are the Mix-a-Lot socks. I can gift those now. The last thing to talk about the Stash Appreciation Society is the Summer Challenge. And for this, I thought that you can use your stash yarn. There's no minimum yardage requirement, but you have to do something with your yarn that is not knitting or crochet. So you could do tapestry, or you could weave with it. You can restructure your yarn. So if you want to try core spinning or something like that, you could do that. But yeah, I'm just really looking forward to seeing what creative endeavours you guys come up with. I don't know if you can do lace making or anything with wool yarn. Crocheted lace doesn't count because that's still crochet, isn't it? But yeah, and like I say, there's no minimum yardage, and so you could just do a bit of embroidery or something. You could make yourself a name tag for your next fiberly adventure. Yeah, so I hope you'll take up the challenge and have a wee think about it and what you're going to do. In the Luli Ravelry group, we also have the Simple Socks knit along going on. So Luli Simple Socks was a collection of patterns that I released in April, and we have a Simple Socks cowl going along in the Luli Ravelry group until the end of this month. So if you are knitting one of those patterns, then please come and join in. And I'm going to open up a finished objects thread so that you can start putting your finished socks there, because there is a prize. Some of you will know that at the end of last year I was hand dyeing yarn, and of course, as most hand dyers do, if they have a skein that they're particularly pleased with, they stash it for themselves, and that's what I did. This is, well, I just put a date on this colourway, but this was my favourite colourway from all of the yarns that I dyed, and so I have decided to give it away for the Simple Socks cowl prize, and it is a 75% BFL, 25% nylon fingering weight yarn. So yes, that would be dead fun to give away to somebody. I love it. Oh, do I want to give it away? I will, yes. So yes, if you come and put your finished socks into the thread, then you'll be in to win this one by the end of this month. So yeah, that will be lots of fun. And of course, I have started knitting away on my ankle socks with ventilation. Some of you have, well, if you've been watching for a while, you would have seen this before. I don't think I've got a whole lot further, but now that I've finished the Mix-a-Lot socks, then I shall start working on these in earnest. And the yarn is from Truly Hooked. Ta-da! Truly Hooked, and it's the standard sock base, which is 75 superwash merino, 25% nylon, in the Citrus Blast colourway. And I'm knitting these ones for me, just because I've been wearing out all of my shorty socks recently. Holy cow, that's bright, blowing out the camera there. Can you even see the detail? So this is ankle socks with ventilation, which quite a few of you seem to be knitting. So yes, join in the chatter thread and pop your finished objects in the finished objects thread. Last week when I was talking to you about the Samite sample that I had knitted up, I made a few comments about knitting with beads, and I have in my stash some hand spun yarn that I spun last year while I was stood in the garden waiting for a certain puppy to relieve himself while I was toilet training. He's no longer a puppy and he is no longer toilet training. He's asleep just over on the couch back over there, you can't see. Anyway, so I had received a sample of fibre from Fondant Fibre, and while I was waiting for him to do his business, I spun this on my drop spindle. Hopefully you can see that. Have it focused? Let me just make sure. Yeah. And this was from, did I say it was from Fondant Fibre? I think it was a merino silk or something like that. So I spun that up, and I decided, I mean, there's only a little bit there, so I couldn't do a big project with it. And having made my comments about knitting with beads last week, I thought I should give it a go, because I've got this little sample, and why not? New things, extending your skills and all that. And so I decided to make a doily. I cast this on last night. I used the Emily Ocker cast on that Elizabeth Zimmerman describes in her books. How can I make this not look like a mess? Yeah, and I've done a few rows on that so far. Is that focusing on me or my knitting? Down here, please. There. It doesn't actually look like much because it's not properly spread out. Well, having it in a triangle doesn't help. You can't really see the pattern that well. But anyway, I decided to make a little doily, and I downloaded the pattern from Ravelry, and it is called Tulip Estonian Inspired Lace Doily, and it's by Linda W. Browning, who is Tiny Knit on Ravelry. If I fold this down, you might be able to see what it's supposed to look like when it's finished. That'll give you a wee bit of an idea. And I thought this would be the perfect sort of small project to try out knitting with beads, because I want to cast on a lace shawl, and I thought it might be nice if I added some beads to the edge, because I have this is Succulent by Maria Monska, and I was thinking if I'd had some beads around the edge of this, it would just give it that little bit of weight so it would sit down a bit better. So I have been downtown this morning and purchased the beads and realised, oh, now I'm throwing them on the floor. I opened them up to see if the crochet hook that I had would go through the hole, but it's a 1.75mm crochet hook, so it's a little bit fat. I'm going to have to buy a new crochet hook for that. Clearly I'm going to have to find a new packet to put these in as well before they go all over the floor. I can't even see them. I'm just going to have to vacuum those up. I'll probably hear them rattling up the vacuum cleaner. But anyway, so yeah, I thought I would give that a go. Is there anything else I need to say about that project? I'll probably have more to say about it when I've finished. I have put it on DPNs, and I was actually thinking when I was starting this with the Emily Ocker cast on that it might have been easier to do on Magic Loop. However, I didn't get my butt off the couch and go and fetch a different needle. I just carried on with what I had, and as you can see, that came out reasonably successfully. So we'll see how that finishes off. Goodness knows what I'm going to do with a doily with beads around the edge, but hey ho, it's all for the sake of an experiment. So yeah. And finally, I had mentioned that I was going to make myself a little shell top from this pattern, this one here, which is New Look 6356. And I have cut it out. I came up here to wind some yarn and ended up starting sewing a top instead. The fabric that I showed you last time, I didn't actually have enough. I think when I use lawn cotton, it's usually about 130 or 140 centimetres wide, and so I get a lot more out of 1 metre than I did. This was just quilting cotton, so it was a lot narrower. So I was a bit bummed about that, because that fabric would have gone really nicely in my wardrobe. So I thought I would use this fabric, which is a lawn cotton. I don't know, this floral might be a bit busy for me, but anyway, so at this point I have cut out all the bits and basted them all together. And you might be wondering why the seam allowances are on the outside, and that's because I'm going to do a French seam. So the next step that I need to do is to actually fit the sides. I sort of contoured it down to the hem quite a bit wider than I need it to be. And so now I just need to taper that in a bit and make sure it fits properly, and then I'll be able to finish off sewing it up. When I make this pattern, it actually calls for you to put facings around the neckband and around the arms, but I just bias bind them because I find that the facings, they kind of, over time, they just never seem to sit flat, and yeah. And so the last version of this top that I made, I just put bias binding around the neck and the well, it had sleeves, so I didn't need to do it around the armhole. I did it around the hem though, I think, just to make a really nice finish. So that's what I'm going to do here. And I realise too, as I'm holding it, I've made this enough that I don't read the instructions anymore that when I make this top. And I haven't actually basted around the neck pieces to start with, so I should probably crack on and do that. If you're new to sewing and you've come across that instruction where it says to baste around the neck pieces, basically that just makes sure that the neck keeps its shape, because it's cut on the bias and it has that stretch. It makes sure that it keeps its shape as you're sewing, so that you don't end up with those little wobbly bits on your neckline. Yeah, so hopefully I'll be able to get some work done on that this weekend, and be a bit closer to finishing it next time. So that's all I had to talk to you about today. It's been lovely coming along and having a little chat with you, and I hope you'll come over and join in the Ravelry group, and I'll see you next time. Cheerio!